Welcome to Required, our podcast. Our LinkedIn Live. We are broadcasting, hopefully using our new Restream software. So if you're not seeing anything, then fault with the system, and we'll have to start all of this again. So good to have you on, Kate. So assuming people are able to see what we're doing, how are you? And tell everyone who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm Kate. I'm head of partner solutions over here at Kingsbridge. For those of you who don't know Kingsbridge, a specialist contractor insurance broker and IR35 consultancy business. We partner with recruiters, with end clients, with accountants to help with contractors and their business insurance, and also on the other side of that, the fun topic of IR35 and helping them with assessing status and a bit of fun IR35 compliance.
Fantastic. So, I've known Kingsbridge for a number of years. Actually, they were insurance partner. I set it up when I was at S3. Actually, so I've known you guys for a number of years, and you've always been in this contractor space. And I think obviously, didn't you buy an IR35 assessment tool, and that's how you then got into the IR35 space?
Slightly more complicated than that. It was we had an awful lot of our recruitment partners come to us and say, "You're the insurance guys. You must be able to help with insuring this new IR35 risk. Apparently, brand new, never heard of it before until 2021." That was, of course, a joke. We do, it's been around for a fair chunk longer than 2021. But yeah, we started off, and they came to us on insurance. Our insurance brokers took that away to our underwriters to have a little look, and in the interim we purchased a business called Larson Howie, some of the ex-directors of places like Kudos and things like that, and we sort of started a consultancy business that was a little bit more manual, and in the process of that we bought a bit of software to actually help assess status. So it all linked in together, the consultancy, the software, and an insurance to sort of underwrite that.
Okay, cool. So I think most people would have, IR35, that was 2019, 2017 with the public sector, and 2021's problem in the private sector. So wind it on 4 years from the private sector reforms, when it was, you'd be watching one of these LinkedIn Lives or podcasts about it every week, it would seem. So where we are now, though, I think the reason it's relevant is the other things in the industry have changed. So I think, we've seen that, a lot of people moved towards a more employed model, into umbrella. And also as well, I think a lot of firms took, I think probably the easy way out around things as well. Two things for me probably mean that we're having this conversation again, and it's really, really fresh. I think the national insurance increases, which we're seeing come into, I think, working numbers, and also as well the umbrella legislation, which is slated to happen April 26th. So first and foremost, I mean, I guess you must run a certain amount of assessments every month, and you write a number of policies. Have you seen a definite change in end customers' attitudes because of the national insurance changes?
So that's a little bit tricky. We have seen we have seen over the last couple of years, so immediately after the reform, so 2021, actually we didn't see as dramatic a drop in terms of numbers and assessments as perhaps we were expecting, and a lot of that was probably because we were working with recruiters and clients that were trying to go out there and not take that rash blanket ban approach and actually look at sort of proactively sort of trying to mitigate in a pragmatic kind of way some of that risk. What we have seen over the last couple of years, though, post that initial transition, is actually it has been a hard slog for most of our recruitment partners. So when we saw or when it was first announced about the national insurance contributions going up, we definitely saw another spike of perhaps not an immediate uplift in assessments, but we certainly saw another uplift of end clients sort of reaching out to us and saying, hey, you know that IR35 thing that's been knocking about for a couple of years, can we pick this back up again? And off the back of that, we've certainly seen a fairly large increase in terms of businesses reaching out to us for a bit of help.
Yeah, I think it seemed to me that I think businesses will come round to it again, and these things go in swings and roundabouts. And I think the other thing as well is that umbrella really felt like, a safe haven. And obviously the devil will be in the detail, but I think again it's probably agencies will, and end customers as well, will now. I mean, the umbrellas obviously. Probably agencies need to think really hard about how they use them, which ones they're using, managing their supply chain, etc.
100%. So, like I said, we do work with lots of recruitment agencies, and we do work with accountancy umbrella companies that actually do place limiteds as well. And you see immediately, or I think we over here at Kingsbridge have seen the good umbrellas, the ones that the reputable brands that we sort of know, they're going out there and they are trying to get on the front foot with this. They're trying to sort of put plans in places. So much like with IR35, there is then not the rash decisions of going, okay, this is too much risk. What are we going to do here? Let's completely try and rethink it. So there's a lot of noise out there at the minute, but I've already seen a good handful of webinars and things around the legislation and the umbrella, the draft bill, and what good practices looks like sharpening up on PSL. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of help out there for recruiters to go.
Yeah, it does feel, for those who don't know, and this, I think sometimes when you live in the contracting world, be it an umbrella or an insurance company or a geek like me, you think this is the big news. But for agencies, it's just one of many things that they're dealing with. But for those who probably possibly not aware, on Monday the government published the draft legislation for how they see the agencies working and end customers working with umbrella companies. So previously, what would have happened, an agency can engage any umbrella company. It can be a legitimate one, it can be an illegitimate one. And as long as they're, I think, not criminally, fraudulently knowing what's going on or actively pushing these schemes, they can contract with anyone. And if the national insurance doesn't get paid, or the POE contributions don't get forwarded on, then they've got no liability. So the people operating the scheme are fully responsible for that. And typically what would happen is they would not do this or not report what they're actually doing, and go off, live in Bermuda, fold the company, go out of business, whatever. So other tax havens are available. But now I believe the terminology is agencies will be jointly and severally liable. So if the company you're dealing with doesn't pay its tax and national insurances, doesn't operate that, then you as an agency, HMRC, will come after you first to recover that.
Yeah. And that's why I think, like I said, a lot of our recruitment agencies, again, that we work with already, will generally have quite a tight rein on their PSL for things like umbrella companies anyway, just because it's fairly widely acknowledged that it's not the most compliant, or there's a few bad apples out there that are giving it a bad reputation. So most of the recruiters that we work with already have some sort of systems in place to make sure that their PSLs, their ASLs are tight, and they're doing their own due diligence. And I think it's probably quite important now in this draft period that recruiters should be going and making sure that they are starting to speak to their supply chains about what they're going to do to try and help get them comfortable with this new risk.
Yeah, I think the legislation, I mean, obviously it puts an onerous and on the agency as well, and a risk on the agency. But I think good agencies have always operated at least with a strong moral compass. And I remember losing out to deals because we just couldn't compete with the rates that, you know, a company giving 15% retentions, you know, giving 85% retentions to workers through questionable schemes were able to offer. And there was, even though there was limited risk for us in doing it, we couldn't knowingly go and enter into that, and often lost out to business to agencies that would do that. So I think for good umbrella companies and for good agencies, this is probably good news, albeit a bit more risk. But if people are doing the right things, mitigating that risk, it's an opportunity to do business and compete again. So it's a LinkedIn Live. So if those watching wish to comment, ask questions, we're open to those as we go. So that's the umbrella, and I think both with the NIC and the umbrella, I think this might prompt both end customers and also agencies to go back and look at, can we be doing something with IR35 again? And I guess, Kate, you probably see this a lot. If I'm an agency and I've got a mixture of workers, mixture of customers, some big, medium, little. Where should I start putting together my IR35 opportunity?
Well, it does. I mean, good question. It really does depend an awful lot in terms of the supply chain that you're a part of, because I think if anything we've learned here, there's working at Kingsbridge, I think for 8 years now, and IR35 for the last 4 or 5. It's every business that we speak to, everything is different, and that includes the clients, the supply chains. It even includes the terminology. We'll see an awful lot of questions around contracted out services, because again, that was a highly sought out topic with the IR35 reforms. But I genuinely, it's got to be, when it comes to IR35, it's got to start with the end client. And we think that and what we saw with the reforms and when they came in, is that those businesses that did react quickly, that they were proactive, that they went out and they didn't just wait for the end clients to turn around and say, look, new bit of legislation here going on that sounds a bit risky, we're going to move away and go to umbrella. Well, do we think there's going to be a complete reversal of that? Probably unlikely. Some of those workers will probably move to umbrella for good reason, but there absolutely is now the opportunity to go to these clients with the, like as you said, Andy, the increase in national insurance contributions, making it more expensive for permanent employees. You've got the Employment Rights Bill that's going to be focusing more about workers' rights and giving them extra, protecting and enhancing these workers' rights. Things like getting rid of 0-hour contracts and rights from day one, making it potentially more expensive again for the end client and supply chain, and more complicated to place these types of workers. Now add in this extra bit of legislation from the finance bill. It's making it complicated for the supply chain to work out who's doing what. It's sounding more and more expensive to even place these types of workers. And umbrella was there, as you said at the start, as like an easy, risk-free sort of way of engaging with temporary workers. And with this new risk, these new costs, it's let's go and have a conversation with these clients about addressing their workforce and working out whether there are other avenues for them to go at, like re-engaging or re-looking at their policies around IR35.
Yeah, and I think actually as well, if I think as well, before IR35, contracting was, I wouldn't say lazy way to bring on additional resource, but we'll bring on a developer, we'll use them in exactly the same way we use our permanent staff, because actually it's quite difficult to work out how long it's going to take, statement of work, what we think this is worth. Have you seen a shift in the way of working, I guess? Because when I first started in this industry in 99, IR35 came in 2000, didn't really have any teeth, because the people responsible were the contractors, and it was effectively tick one of two boxes: would I like to pay a lot more tax or not? And again, the revenue had to go after one contractor by one contractor. Once they put it into the public sector and the private sector, it meant that they had to go after effectively people who had money to pay on big banks and big risks. Big banks of workers and big risks. So have you seen in the last 4 years, especially, firms actually treating freelancers as freelancers?
Yeah. So particularly when we go and engage with clients, whether that's directly or via the recruiters, the first thing we actually start is taking a bit of a step back, because hopefully without taking us on too much of a tangent, but I think historically when HMRC has looked at status, and this is coming from the tax team, just to be clear, this is not my area of expertise, the actual claim side of things, but historically it has been, okay, you're working outside, we think you're inside, and it's getting to the nitty gritty of status straight away. Whereas now with these claims that we're seeing in chapter 10, with the new rules, the claims that Kingsbridge are dealing with and seeing it's a step away from that. It is a show us what your policy is on IR35, what's your take on individual status tests, who is the one that's assessing these roles, and how can you demonstrate that you have the education and relevant knowledge to be answering these questions effectively. And so when we are engaging with clients, it is no longer a case of quick, let's just go through and answer some questions and see about this particular thing. It's a bit of a step back. What is your general policy on this? What does it look like? And if they don't have that sort of thing in place already, that's where we then go in and start helping sort of prop them up a little bit with help and expertise from the tax team. Because as you say, it is very much no longer a case of just lift and shift from one model to the other. It is a case of, if you're wanting to engage these workers, there is a legitimate way of doing that. It doesn't have to be the most complicated thing in the world. We just need to unpick a bit, set out some rules, and we can get you working in a compliant way.
So my understanding of what you guys do is you basically help people out, you get their policies, you then help them with their assessments. So the assessments will be done by their end customers. And then if everything's been done right, you ensure that result. So if ever it comes back that it was outside, you support them in terms of fighting that determination.
Exactly that. In an ideal world, it would be enough to say, look, let's go in and, like you said, let's the consultancy piece is something that we really harp on about, and you will see from my enthusiasm with that. But it is really as simple as, let's get the right people in the right room and let's start again. Let's put some things in place we can help you with before we introduce the actual software which helps you assess status. Our platform is automated, but there's a manual element. So you will basically, if you ever end up on that borderline assessment, you've got a team of people that will jump on the case and help work that through. So you're never left on we're not really sure. It's either inside or outside. And then we do have an insurance product to underpin that process, mainly because whether you're engaging with Kingsbridge, whether you're engaging with another third-party provider, this is our opinion on status. And with the best will in the world, if HMRC are going to come and investigate or agree or disagree, the only way to do that, to find out if you have assessed status properly, is to open investigation. And the cost of fighting that can be quite expensive. And so then we've got a team of in-house people that will actually help. Our head of tax, I think, again, if you've been on a Kingsbridge webinar, you'll have heard us talk about Andy Vesey, but he's got a pretty impressive background in defending cases against HMRC, and he would be helping push that, or working with your client to push that claim away.
In terms of workers, for those who are not super familiar with IR35, what are the sort of workers that really don't, you couldn't, make a case for an assessment, and what are the ones that are slam dunks? You should be putting these workers are genuine freelancers. They should be outside. And I appreciate that's like a wide spectrum of the UK workforce, but examples.
Yep. One of the worst questions for you to have posed me, and my IR35 team are going to kill me, because I will preface this with, everything is different. You have to assess every different type of role separately. It depends on the client, how they're willing to engage these workers. But we do see an awful lot. When we first started, I guess this covers back to your kind of your previous question. When we first started this consultancy piece back in probably actually 2020, before it even came into effect, it was a lot more, okay, jumping on a call, we've got a business as usual IT person just coming in to fill in a gap, and actually what the client was willing to accept and not accept was not great. So a lot of those conversations were like, look, unless you're willing to change how you're going to engage this contractor, that is an inside role. But yeah, in terms of the slam dunk outside, it's almost impossible to say, because you'll name a job title and you'll speak to a client and they're like, oh yeah, absolutely, it's a project, which is great, there's clear defined deliverables, there's a start and end date, all of this is great. And then you start talking to them about their policy on substitution, and that's a complete no. And then you start talking about integration. Oh, but we've got small things, but we want to give them their own equipment, we want to make them feel part of the family. And it's been one of the most interesting things has been some of the clients' take on just wanting to make sure that a worker has an enjoyable time when they're out on site. And you're like, you can do that, but you're probably going to end up having to pay more, and they're probably going to end up having to work inside, or you could just tweak some very basic stuff and let them work outside. So I've probably done
that basically make sure they've got the worst parking spot or charge them for it. No invite to the Christmas party. All of those things.
Exactly. Make them feel like a real outsider.
No benefits, definitely. Fantastic. Thanks. Thanks for the nice comment, Alex Riley from Firefish. Really interesting scene setting. Thanks both. There's a compliment for you, Kate, I think. So, yeah. So, where do you see this going? So, if we're having this conversation in a year's time, what would we be talking about now in terms of both independent workers and maybe maybe for agencies? How are they? Are they going to be able to insure this risk? That type of thing. I guess that's something you guys are looking at the moment.
Well, look, I think this, although it's new legislation, agencies having to deal with the risk of the supply chain is nothing new. So whether you're looking at Section 44, the onshore intermediaries, agency legislation, when agencies are placing self-employed sole traders, including those getting paid CIS, that agency legislation is basically stipulating that if a contractor or a worker or a contractor is under the supervision, direction, or control or right of that supply chain, it is on the agency's head if they get that status incorrect. If they say that they're self-employed and then actually not, the agency's holding that risk themselves. We've clearly had a big conversation about IR35 and how actually agencies have had to go out there and mitigate their own risk as fee payer. It's, again, client's decision about whether they can work inside or outside IR35, but if they get that wrong and HMRC disagrees, it very likely could fall on the fee payer to look at this. The big difference in this, I think, with the finance bill, the draft finance bill, is that this is a matter of fact. This isn't an opinion on whether you are self-employed or not. It's are you paying the correct amount of tax or are you not? And so this does feel slightly more. They have to deal with a lot of unfair things. I think to your point at the start, the intention is correct. There's a lot of recruiters and umbrella companies out there that are very compliant, and they've been crying out for something like this for a long time. But moving this over to the recruiter is another tough pill to swallow for some, I think. And what all of this, because I think it is a bigger picture, it's the increase in national insurance, the employment rights, the rights of the workers, the employment rights bill, plus this tax. It is making it more expensive. It is making it harder. You're seeing, again, I think, Andy, you mentioned before we actually even jumped on the call, that employment rates just keep falling. And one of the ways to mitigate some of this risk, to keep that temporary worker option there, is to look at different vehicles other than umbrella. So I think we will see probably an increase in sole traders. I think we'll definitely see a shift to limiteds. And I think the only thing that might potentially stop that shift to limiteds, which I think is a very sensible option for people to go and pursue, is if anything dramatic comes out in the news, any big public enforcement cases of Chapter 10 of the new IR35 rules that might scare some clients a bit. But ultimately, with stuff over here, this employment, self-employed, it's a risk that we are somewhat more familiar with. It's what some people are slightly more comfortable with. So I do think we will see that shift towards contingent workforce again in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. I think with the taking on a permanent hire now with the NICs, with with the new legislation, with day one rights. Yeah, I think we'll go the. I think we'll definitely see what we see in Europe. I mean, somewhere like the Netherlands, the first year is always a fixed term contract. That you don't want to hire that person until you're absolutely sure that you want this person in your organization, because if you don't, you're in for a long long time. I think we may start to see that, and I think these things eventually wash themselves out and you get to that equilibrium. But I think the thing for me as well is that we are only 8 months away from it, which feels very, very close. And agencies, I always find, deal with what's going to kill them, like from a month out. So even, GDPR, we had like 2 to 3 years to worry about. Everyone's still waiting till the last month. So I'm quite sure that, 8 months is long enough for everyone to deal with it. But still, it's going to be interesting to see how it definitely all plays out. I'm just looking, no more questions at the moment. If you want to ask a question, then please feel free to. But I think if we're just going to sort of wrap up where we are, I genuinely feel that there is an opportunity for workforces, and I think you're going to see for employers, rather than hiring people, potentially hiring agentic agents and freelancers to fill in the spots. So the other interesting thing for me as well is how many of these roles will go, but how many will just be taken up by automation and AI. And I don't know if you've started to see any of that come through in your numbers or your clients.
Not yet, but I'm sure time will tell.
Hypothetically, and again, this is if you have digital workers, are you going to have to take out policies on your digital workers going forward? This could be a new angle for Kingsbridge here.
I tell you what, I'll write it down immediately and just reach out to the underwriters and find out if there's a new hot news on the LinkedIn Live. We might have a new insurance product here.
Yeah, great. And as long as I get my royalty, I'm fine with that as well. But genuinely, we were discussing it on. Generally, we were discussing in our group the other day that if you've got these products that answer emails on your behalf, if it gets the wrong answer, binds you in a contract, signs a contract, you can't. Who's liable? Because ultimately you've let this thing loose with it. Yeah. So anyway, there we go. There's one for you guys. We do have a question from Jean Svanepoel. Will JSL joint several liability apply even if we've excised enhanced due diligence and safe rec audits? I think I know the answer to this, but I'll let the professional do it.
Unfortunately, yes. It's a case of again, it comes to legislation versus contractual liability or contractual indemnities and things like that. But ultimately, the legislation says if you get it wrong, if they get it wrong, then you guys will be joint and severally liable. But yeah, to that effect, though, I mean, it is still a draft bill. It's, as you said, It's not coming back. There's still subject to final consultations and things like that. So it might be that something else that crops up, but it looks like you guys will be quite firmly on the hook.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, John. So even if you are with accredited umbrella or audits or safe rec checking through, if anyone in that supply chain gets it wrong, you're still on the hook, and that's even that's so you have no defense of negligence and you have no defense of fraud either. Ultimately, it's still on you, full liability. So probably not the answer you wanted to hear, John, but as it stands in the draft legislation, that's my understanding, and the understanding of sort of run that past a couple of lawyers as well. So fun times ahead. Kate, thanks so much for this. I mean, like the great thing about you guys at Kingsbridge is you actually make IR35 interesting, and having lived it probably for 20 odd years, it's rare for me to say that. So thank you for that. If people do want to find out a little bit more about how they can improve, I think 3 things you spoke about: the consultancy, the assessment, and also the insurance, how can they get hold of you?
So they can reach out to us on the direct line. I can give you a number. So it's 01242 395 020. Drop me an email, kate.robinson@kingsbridge.co.uk. And yeah, if anybody wants to reach out on LinkedIn, you've got my details.
Okay, I've just put that number in the comments, so it's absolutely there. Kate, thanks so much. Let's do this again. Once the real legislation comes through, and also when you get this digital worker policy come through, I'm sure there'll be lots of people signing up for it, and happy to take the royalty for it.
Completely. I've written your name down right next to it. Copyright.
Thanks, Kate. Take care.